our agency. Certainly, you can view all of our meetings online. The meeting tonight is not being streamed live. The live function on our town website is not functioning, but this video will be posted to the YouTube page hopefully by tomorrow. So for the agency members in attendance, Randy, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Randy Dill.
Andrew Lord.
John Cotter.
And Irene Haynes, our first selectman. There are several members that couldn't be here tonight, but certainly they all work together in collaboration in providing this information to you in the form of an information session. So we're going to actually start back in 2002, if I can, about the history of the village property. Certainly it goes even much further back to the early, I think, 1970s when that property was purchased. But from 2002 to 2005, the Planning and Zoning Commission participated with village residents and business owners to develop a vision statement for the East Haddam Village aimed at preserving the neighborhood and architectural character, scale, scope, views, and vistas that have historically characterized the village. So a vision for East Haddam included 6 project guidelines to ensure the development would enhance and restore the character of the East Haddam Village while improving many existing issues. So let's talk a little bit about each of those topics. Aesthetics. As we know, East Haddam Village is nationally recognized a historical district with multiple historical structures. It was the vision that both the River House and the former town office buildings be incorporated into the developer's overall plan. For economic development, that in order for the village to be vibrant and viable, there must be a mixture of residential, commercial, public, and private developments. For roadway and traffic flow, not only do the existing roads, including the East Haddam Swing Bridge, suffer from heavy traffic volumes, especially lately, but the layout of the roads fragment the community. It was strongly supported that traffic calming measures be implemented to slow traffic through the village. Additionally, pedestrian safety and access to the village are issues definitely still needing our attention. Therefore, development of improved and expanded sidewalks and crosswalks were noted. For parking, currently there is not an adequate amount of parking to allow an increased number of tourists. Additional parking designed as small, dispersed, interconnected areas necessary for the village to be commercially viable were noted. Natural resources. East Haddam Village offers access to unique features along the Connecticut River Valley. There was a desire that the development of the village provide easy public access to these areas for pedestrians while maintaining the integrity of the natural resources. And last but not least, community involvement. It was desired to achieve a development plan that reflects the wants and needs of all aspects of the community. It was the belief and remains the belief that the future development of the East Haddam Village and town office site, in conjunction with the recent expansion and renovation of the Goodspeed Opera House Foundation housing facilities, would create the critical mass that would sustain significant economic growth. Created in 2008, the East Haddam Village Revitalization Committee, or VRC, expanded upon these themes and received significant input and research into what could feasibly be done in the village space. It requested qualifications and proposals for the village site and held public hearings to listen to community comments and concerns over the course of many years. The work of the VRC coincided with the town offices moving into this building, the municipal office complex, but its pace was not contingent upon that move. VRC sent out an RFQ and later an RFP. One developer, Centerbridge Group, submitted qualifications, and later a plan by Centerbridge called Swingbridge Landing was submitted for VRC for consideration. VRC chose Centerbridge Group as the preferred developer at that time. A letter of intent was signed by the town in January 2021 to begin the process with Centerbridge Group. That plan, however, was not advanced by the Board of Selectmen to a town vote. Notably, VRC did not have the same charge of work as the present redevelopment agency, which is created by town ordinance and modeled after state statute. So what has the agency done to date? And how was that created? In January of 2022, the Board of Selectmen solicited applications for those interested in serving on this agency. The agency was created by ordinance in a town meeting on August 3rd, 2022, to, in relevant part, prepare or cause to be prepared a redevelopment plan for the redevelopment area, and any developer could submit a redevelopment plan to the agency. Members of the agency were elected to certain terms as part of that town meeting. At that town meeting, the village area tasked for redevelopment was found within the pink line noted on the map. After several meetings of identifying key issues that needed answers, committees were formed to perform certain tasks. Our first committee that we'd like to report on, John Cotter, would you like, with your committee, to update us on what your environmental committee has
We
been up
would
to?
be delighted. So the Environmental Committee is made up of myself, Jackie Noel, and Jim Curtin. So we have a little history lesson. Between March 2002 and October 2018, the town of East Haddam retained the services of multiple professional environmental consulting firms to assist with the evaluation of the site and initiate remedial action activities. These studies included phases 1 through phases 3, environmental assessments and investigations, building hazard assessments to support potential renovations and/or demolition of structures, as well as preparation for conceptual remedial action plan. Remedial actions already conducted have included the removal of several underground storage tanks and the remediation by excavation of both petroleum and arsenic impacted soil. The primary environmental impacts at the site appear to be associated with former use of the property by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. Historical property use from 1911 through 1973 included a blacksmith shop, a machine shop, bridge construction fabrication, a paint storage, petroleum product storage, all in underground storage tanks. Hazardous waste generated on the property appear to be the result of materials left behind by the Connecticut DOT, specifically paint waste associated with bridge maintenance. Our environmental committee was tasked with hiring a firm to do an assessment and provide guidance regarding possible remediation of the property. Upon a vote of the agency, it hired firm VHB to analyze the issues of the property, including surrounding properties not within that red zone up there. Due to the great work of the VHB, our agency, town officials, we recently were awarded a brownfield grant by the state in the amount of $200,000 to assess the town-village site and surrounding properties. So we're very excited about that.
And John, just to clarify, this is an assessment grant. This isn't to necessarily remediate the property. That would
Correct.
come later, correct?
The problem with original testing that was done was it was very rudimentary. They did about 12 site holes. We're going to do much more than that, and we're going to be covering about 10 properties in the area. So we get a really good sense of what's in that ground. You know, is groundwater being affected, so on and so forth.
Thank you. I'm going to report for the Finance Committee because both Tom and Bill are absent this evening. Our Finance Committee has been exploring ways in which to finance the project, create certain revenue streams like tax incremental financing and attracting possible developers. In its initial phase, this committee will create and manage the budget for the agency and begin working with the other committees to begin next year's budget. Additionally, it will analyze financing options in detail and share them with the agency. This would include a draft of financial policies and possible grant writing options. It is expected this committee, in conjunction with our other committees, will participate in an education awareness campaign, which will include the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance. An RFP was issued for potential firms to conduct tax incremental financing, or TIF, for the village project. Our firm was chosen to conduct this planning for us, but we await the budget for next year to get that process started. More information about TIF and its impact on the village will be shared in future information sessions. I'm going to also report for the Community Outreach Committee. It is critical that our agency, that the public not only be involved in this process, but be informed. This committee was created with the purpose of creating events like the one here tonight and publicizing the work of the agency. And last but not least, the Executive Committee. This committee was created to work directly with other town committees and with a possible developer or developers as the village project progresses. In May, the committee met with Centerbridge Group, and later on May 10th, 2023, Centerbridge submitted a redevelopment plan for the agency's consideration. Upon receipt, the agency only confirmed the plan submitted met the statutory definition of redevelopment plan under the state law. The agency did not take a position on the plan at that juncture. Also, per ordinance, the agency was then required to submit that plan to Planning and Zoning for its study and written opinion, including a determination as to whether or not that plan is consistent with the town's plan of conservation and development. So there was some preliminary discussion about the plan with Planning and Zoning this past Tuesday, and we expect to get a report from Zoning following their next meeting at the end of July. So what are our next steps? So as we wait for the study and written opinion of the Planning and Zoning Commission to be returned to us, we continue to work on the task before us, including moving forward with our environmental assessment and funding options. Once the report comes back to us from Planning and Zoning to the agency will then hold a public hearing on the plan submitted to allow public input on the plan itself, and after the public hearing, then as an agency, consider the plan for approval. After the agency has approved a plan, it then should be submitted for approval to a town committee. So for more information, you can certainly go to our website. Our agency meets the second Thursday of each month, and our subcommittees meet at a time that is allowable for our members and as necessity dictates throughout the month. rhshare@easthaddam.org is our email address. We welcome any and all correspondence to our email address before, during, or after meetings. If we cannot get to that correspondence, we will attach the same to our minutes. Our webpage has an enormous amount of past and present information for review, including the documents shown tonight. Do any of the other agency members want to chime in and add any additional information?
No.
I just want to add, too, that this is going to be the first of what I expect to be many information sessions to keep the public apprised. We recognize that the public may not be able to attend or watch every single meeting that we have. So stay tuned. We've got a lot of work in front of us. We've done a lot of work in these last 10 months, and we welcome your comments. Would anyone like to ask questions?
Hi, do you have any guiding principles on what you're looking for in a development plan that might be put forward? In other words, the one you got from Centerbridge, my understanding is it's pretty high level. It doesn't have a lot of financial information or where he's going to get funding and so forth. So do you have any guiding principles that would guide you to make a selection and actually present it to the town? Or are you just going to take whatever comes?
Well, I don't think we would take whatever comes. As citizens ourselves, we are the stewards of making sure that this project is done appropriately and with due diligence. And I think I speak for the agency that we've had this discussion many times, that we are still in the investigatory phase. We don't have any, to answer your question more pointedly, we don't have any written guiding principles other than what was set out in the vision for East Haddam, consistent with the plan of conservation. But I expect as that plan may come back to us with some guidance from Planning and Zoning, that will be narrowed, and we will be having those discussions. And I certainly welcome you, Marilyn, to come and talk to us about your questions and concerns at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Why are we dealing with Centerbridge at this point? As far as I understand, the Centerbridge had broken. The company was no longer there, and we are pursuing cleaning the site. We're pursuing a TIF. We're basically creating a basis from which we'd be in a much better position to get a larger range of developers. I don't understand why there was a meeting with Centerbridge and why this is still on the table at this point. When we have done, when I commend the development agency for doing what they're doing, and I think the environmental work is very important and moving forward with the grant. I think it's very important that the TIF is done properly, and I don't see why this is brought forth. It seems to me that it's out of place in terms of of what you've been asked to do.
I'm so glad you asked that question, and I want to sort of expand on what I mentioned earlier about how it was that Centerbridge came to submit this redevelopment plan. So on or about May 10th, at our May 10th meeting, which you can watch online for certain, Jeff Riley of Centerbridge Group gave a detailed background as to sort of why now, whatever, how he wanted us to consider this plan. And he wanted us to consider this plan and move it forward to planning and zoning. According to our town ordinance and according to statute, we are required not necessarily to approve or deny the plan at that time. It's a shall send to planning and zoning right then and there. So all our agency did at that time was confirm that the plan itself met the statutory definition of redevelopment plan, which the agency confirmed that it did. That's all we determined at that time. So now that it goes to planning and zoning, once it comes back to us, then we talk more in depth about the plan. To Marilyn's point, we talk about our guiding principles and what we want to see and how this is going to shake out and whether or not we submit it to a town meeting at that point. So the quick answer to your question, though, is that we got a plan. It met the statutory definition. We were required to accept it and send it along to planning and zoning. But we didn't approve it. That's what I want to be very clear on. Our agency hasn't approved or denied anything yet. We are just moving it along the channels pursuant to our ordinance.
Yeah, and I'll just add that if the Planning and Zoning Commission determines that it's not consistent with the Plan of Conservation and Development, then it really doesn't go any further until they modify the plan to make that. So we've got a lot of steps to go. This is just the first step in the statutory process. This is what we have to follow to move things forward.
And then the one thing I just want to add too is that the fact that there is a plan in process is not stopping forward momentum on our end, doing the things that we set out here. And one thing I neglected to mention is that we have certain universities that are interested in creating plan designs for us, and we're moving forward with that as well. So if we received, 3 plans next week, we would be doing the same thing with those plans.
Okay, that's very helpful, and also it's very helpful that you're saying that we're going to have universities involved, because I think that will give a lot more vision, for us to explore, and for us as citizens to be able to say, wow, this is really exciting, wow, this is too much. So I'm very happy with that direction.
John?
Yes, Melanie. Does the plan that was proposed in May by Centerbridge continue the previous proposal on Centerbridge's part to purchase the municipal lot from the town?
Yes. And what we've heard as far back as 2009, 2010 is that any developer is going to require us to sell the property to them in order to do the development. There's no, and we've heard from multiple sources that there's not an option to lease it to a developer if we want a development to take place there.
One difference, I would assume, since we have state funding to look at the remediation of the brownfield site, is that Centerbridge is not proposing that they clean up the site as they did in their earlier plan.
I'm not certain that Centerbridge was saying that they were going to clean it up. My understanding from then and most recently is that they were going to put like a topsoil over it. I'm inartfully saying that, and my husband's in construction. He would probably say that's not the right term. But in any event, that they wouldn't necessarily need to dig up the contaminants, that there would be an avenue to sort of work around it.
So, let me clarify that. So, initially, my understanding was that they would, we would, sell the property to them, and they would take responsibility, for the Old Town Garage.
Yes.
Right.
Is that still?
That's my understanding, is that still remains on the table, that they would still do that in the new plan.
But we will be, when we complete this work under the grant that we just received, we will have a very better understanding of the environmental conditions at the site that will help them evaluate the risks and add to their design to figure out exactly how they're gonna deal with the contamination. There's a very plausible possibility that there's some remediation that doesn't need to be done because of natural conditions. You know, that's one of the things that they're really focusing on. So the purpose of this grant is to further characterize the site so that we can get a more definitive understanding of the environmental conditions there that will eliminate some of the risk on any developer's attraction to the property.
Also, I might add, because I have been in touch myself with technical assistance for brownfields at UConn, and I presume you're going through that same route. That opens up, that first step opens up the possibilities of a, grant pipeline.
Yes.
Yes.
EPA funds, et cetera.
Absolutely.
So
That's exactly
Yes.
our strategy.
Mhm.
So we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. We're really, really happy to have this first grant.
Yeah.
But we understand that once we get this first grant and it's attractive to the DEP or HUD or
EPA.
DECD, that it'll open the door to a lot of other things that could help us with the financing down the road for whoever's project it is.
Thank you.
And can I just add to that, which would mean that the value of the property would be much higher than what Centerbridge had, was willing to pay.
Yeah,
for-
it could be.
Potentially.
It could be, but that's
Yeah, just that.
down the
that's
road.
part of it.
Down the road, we're thinking about it. It's on our
Yeah.
map.
Yeah,
But right now, we're not at that point yet.
Yeah, that's fine, because, that was one of the ways that it was sold to the public, is that, all that remediation is gonna cost so much,
Right.
and that's why we need to sell it.
Yeah,
So-
but that's because we don't have all that information. The
But we
more
don't
that we
know
can
that.
narrow down that information, the more refined we can make the estimate on the costs, which is reflected in the price of the property.
So what we did
That's
is,
where we're going.
yep, so what we did as an agency, if you recall, when we first started as an agency, is we sat down and we figured out what did the public need to know last time that they didn't know, and what information can we get on our own? And that's where TIF came into play, some tax abatement information, but also the environmental. Next up is gonna be the actual property value, which is what we'll need. Once we do the assessment, we'll need to know actually what the property value is once we have the assessment done. So things are progressing, but we're getting the answers to the questions that the town posed a couple years ago. Jeff?
My biggest concern, now that we have a statutory agency,
Could you speak up, please?
I'll try. My biggest concern now that we have a statutory redevelopment agency is that, we don't go through 20 years of drift again. And I applaud everything you've been doing, up to this point. But, I think there also needs to be, once you're done with some of these items, got to be, somebody that comes in and synthesizes everything and tells you how these projects are done. You don't do a purchase and sale contract, okay? In many cases, we do a pre-development agreement with a selected developer, And that pre-development agreement sets forth the terms and conditions for all the due diligence, for maybe getting some financing, getting grants and other things in place so that you can proceed, and you don't spend a ton of money arguing over a full-blown redevelopment and purchase agreement. You don't want to lose control of the property, right? And I think at a prior meeting, I gave the example of South Windsor, right? And in most, I would say the great majority of transactions I've done, and I've done hundreds, the town gives the land because it's, deemed to be, it may have brownfields conditions, it's in a blighted area or whatever, and it just helps the deal, get done, right? But, in the case of South Windsor, they wanted, they had some politically connected people who wanted to leverage the Connecticut film tax credit. So they were going to build Connecticut studios. And the town did a purchase agreement and sold them the property for $1. They had no money. They weren't eligible for film tax credits because it wasn't an operating studio, studio. They hired a consultant who was also kind of a construction manager and the like, and that construction manager loaned them money and put a mortgage on the property. Nothing happened. Developer went bankrupt. The construction manager also went bankrupt, owed our client a lot of money, and we ended up with the property, much to the town of South Windsor's chagrin. The notion that you need to own the property to get your financing, just not true. I've done, many leasehold deals. And in fact, under Chapter 130, which is what you're operating under, a TIF financing under Chapter 130, the municipality has to own the real estate, has to have a title to the real estate. Can't issue the bonds, otherwise. You have 132, which, has been used for decades, and that, is the municipality doing it directly. Now you've got Chapter 105, which is the new TIF statute. A lot of flexibility, but that's going to duplicate all your effort because you're going to create a TIF district, which is not going to be the same as redevelopment area. You have to come up with your own plan under that statute. There's a second referral to P&Z. Now that may be the way you do it for off-site improvements and all of that, but there's a lot of mistakes that can be made along the way as you get through it, and having a TIF consultant, I think, that would be a big help in pulling that together.
Who do you recommend to synthesize the information, like a project manager? I'm
happy to have, come in and, for one of my partners, have a, pro bono training session or whatever. Because it's the documents are essentially the same, irrespective of where we do them. But I think having that structure and understand it, but the real thing is, you got to face the developer, in the face, head on and say, where's your equity dollars? Because if they have no equity dollars to start with, stop. Okay? Just stop. If they have $25 million in the bank, or firm commitments that, like from a capital fund or something that says they're going to fund on a capital draw, great. But that's usually why we never convey property until the very end.
Right.
When we do a property, a development of a PDDA, which is usually what most of the law firms call, it's a property disposition and development agreement. We want the ability to get that property back, and there's thresholds. Town of Manchester just terminated a developer because they weren't able to get financing, so there's milestones along the way. We're only selling that property or donating that property to the developer because they're supposed to build us what we want. And if they can't do it, they got to move. You clear them off the stage and you start with somebody else. Just a straight purchase doesn't do anything.
Yep. So basically benchmarks along the way that they have to meet in order for it to go through.
Yeah, they've got to show a financing commitment. There's got to be you know, if there's grants, or, I mean, every deal's different.
Right,
And they have to have P and Z approvals, or, you know,
Yeah.
wetlands, you know, whatever it may be. Because, you know, if you don't have those, the likelihood the project's not gonna work anyway.
right,
And the worst thing to have is a defaulted project.
yeah.
That, you know, where the developer files bankruptcy and then, you know.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, I think I welcome and so appreciate your willingness to come down and do a workshop for us. I mean, the more information we can get on moving forward, the better. So if the,
And the other thing I would just, you know, and this is the last thing I'm gonna say, is that engaging with Centerbridge is not a bad thing. You know, ultimately, you don't have to approve it.
right,
But to engage with them appropriately.
Right.
You know, with, you know, look, you know, we're just going through the process here, we're not committed to anything. You're gonna learn something from it.
Right.
Which I think is, you know, is important, you know, for everybody.
Yep.
With the public, you know, members, you know, like, but I think that the financing's gotta come first, particularly in that case.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I ran the numbers on it, and, you know, they've given you a bunch of financing options. You want a, you know, 100% 10-year tax abatement, and, you know, the last time I looked, you know, like the original plan, I think it was like 15 million of equity, 25 million or so of, you know, conventional financing, senior financing, and then they wanted a TIF to fill in like 15 or 20 million dollars. You know, if you have 100% tax abatement, there's no money, you know, to service that.
right,
And then, you know, even if you're getting a partial tax abatement, you know, because if the town has to pay, I think it's like up to like 9,400,000, you know, 9.7 on the offsite improvements. Well, if there's no cash flow in terms of taxes coming back to the town, how are you gonna service that $9 million?
Right.
Because that's not part of the Centerbridge plan. Their budget's like $51 million. I know in the new plan, there's like 13 million of like pre-development costs, it's like on page 4
Yes.
or something.
mm-hmm,
I don't know whether that's part of the 51 or the 9.2, or if it's separate. And if it's separate, you're talking a $70 million project.
Yeah.
And you can, and it's great to get a $200,000 brownfield grant. It's great to get, you know, there may be some, you know, maybe you can get some federal money to cover the 9.7 or a portion of that. That's all great, but, you know, you're still looking at $50 million or so.
Yeah.
That's a heavy lift.
Yep.
Thanks,
Thanks, Jeff, appreciate it.
Yeah, just a couple additional comments on that, for the rest of the people in the group. We've interviewed several different TIF consultants. We hired the one that we think that is the best, that's gonna, we think, do a really good job with us. They've got a lot of experience, so they can address a lot of those concerns. So I think we're in good stead on that, once we can get that moving. The other thing is, on the real estate acquisition, we don't have to sell it to them. I mean, we could give them an option until the time comes, and then, you know, we're not gonna transfer the property until we have a deal on, as to what they're gonna do, so. And then, I think that,
Pre-development agreement or development agreement.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
banks understand that.
yeah, right, so I think we can overcome that hurdle, and then I think that the big nut is gonna be, how do we handle offsite improvements that aren't gonna be handled by the developer? I think that's really where there might be some issues that we have to tackle, but again, we're at the very beginning of the process, and move on from there. But thanks for your comments.
Hold on, John, I'm gonna, yep, go ahead, Rob.
Sorry, John.
I always spoke.
Well, that never stopped you. Excuse us. So back in December, you said that Center Ridge is, want of a better word, defunct, no longer in business. If I understood the meeting,
Yep.
early in the meeting.
Did you watch the May meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was
So,
clarified.
And they are still around, obviously.
Yep.
All right. So, did they reconstitute themselves?
I have no idea, you'd have to ask Mr. Riley that.
Has anyone checked to see if the Secretary of State, see if they are in existence?
No, but I'm sure you could do that, Rob, right?
Did you?
I did.
But anyway, moving on, and and Jeff was talking about financing, and I'm gonna call their latest proposal Swing Bridge Light. Anyone talk to Goldman and York and see if they actually have any financing? There were some questions, I think, on the earlier presentation that maybe they didn't have, and as Jeff alludes to, that they were maybe underwater with their proposal as far as financing.
As I mentioned, we haven't gotten into the nuts and bolts of the plan. We will be doing that. We're not there yet.
And I know this is not your responsibility because it is really the planning and zoning, but there's at least 2 people on the planning and zoning that should recuse themselves, possibly 3.
You should go to their July 27th meeting and discuss that with them.
Because I checked someone said it was going to be in this last meeting, and I didn't see anything on the agenda, so that's why I didn't.
There was a brief discussion about it, but the chair was not there at the meeting in June.
The TIF, it's been talked about for a long time by members of this group, your agency. Patrick McManus, I think, came in and said you need to expand your area for the TIF and the redevelopment agency. I would be surprised if your TIF consultant didn't even recommend enlarging the area. Is there a plan to enlarge the area? That was first brought forth way back when, before this agency was created.
Yep.
And it seemed to us at the time there was a rush to get this in the works, and maybe that should have been considered at that time.
Right. So you recall, though, that the clarification on the pink or red area was that this agency wasn't in a position at that time to expand or make smaller that area. And we haven't officially hired our TIF consultant yet to get that information because we don't have a budget. So once we do, we will certainly look to our new vendor to provide that information to us and give us guides.
Tomorrow, expand the area.
Right. And tomorrow we are not, because we are going to wait.
No, we could not.
We are going to wait to make any recommendations to the Board of Selectmen to enlarge the area pending what you say is.
You recommend that it go to the Board of Selectmen.
Right, and I know that there's this conception that we are somewhat maybe even opposed to doing so. We're not. We're just not there yet. So I feel like maybe there's an inclination to rush us to do that. We're just not there to expand it at this time. We're waiting for additional information.
What information are you?
To your point, we're waiting for the TIF consultant to come on board to tell us whether or not we need to expand it, at least for the tax incremental financing. We also don't have a plan before us right now. It's before planning and zoning. So once we get that back, we'll be in a better position to see whether or not we need to expand it.
So not to start a debate, but what would be your proposal for expanding the district?
There was maps presented.
No, just give me a description of what you.
Basically, the whole village up as far Main Street, at least to the old insurance bank or New England Bank, whatever. Where ESO has his house now. And Creamery Road, Lumberyard Road, up to Ray Hill.
Okay.
I mean, that was what was part of the original concept that was presented by a fair number of people.
Just curious what your thoughts are.
Because if you're going to be doing development in town, out in, adjacent to 1 and 7, you need to be able to do some work, but you can't do it if you don't have it as part of your redevelopment agency. So you get stuck. You know, if you want to put nice street lights in front of, or different lights in front of the Goodspeed in Gelston House, it's not part of your area.
But John, correct me if I'm wrong, the assessment grant that we just got goes beyond the scope of
It actually covers 10 properties.
It covers 10 properties.
So it actually covers properties outside that red zone.
Well, that was going to be my next question, John. When you said 10 properties, I want to make sure you're talking about 10 properties, not necessarily just in the RA.
Contiguous.
Contiguous, yes.
So we're already thinking along those lines. So
Correct.
yeah.
Yep.
Can you
I just want to stick with Rob. Did you have anything else before?
I just want.
I know, but I want Rob to be able to finish his comments.
So one of the things you talked about is one of your 5 guiding principles was aesthetics.
One of 6, and that wasn't ours. That was planning and zoning that I was reading from roughly the studies that they did in 2002 to 2005.
So, I mean, another thing that was talked about early on was form-based code, and which really specific or really addresses aesthetics and something that, again, was recommended to the RA that we want to be looking at.
We did actually look at it, and we confirmed that there is actually a form-based code for planning and zoning, right?
In the village.
In the village area. So we checked that box.
So what is the form? Are
I-
we talking about photographs or?
No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm
Yeah.
just saying, when that village district regs were formed, that was part of the whole concept, is aesthetics and all the rest of it that went into that. That's part of what we went through with that, in developing the new regulations in the village, because I don't think the regulations in the village are gonna change that much.
Probably not.
Harvey probably was chairman at the time.
And then as part of, has there been, and I may let John run with this, but climate resiliency. There are issues, and one of the major issues in town are, of course, the Sucker Brook and the impact to the theater, dance, dance studio, the dance studio, the rehearsal studio, finally got there. And the fact that, you know, that they've had a number of issues
Floods.
with flooding in Sucker Brook.
Yeah.
Visiting the dance floor and having to spend money there. And as a practical matter, the only way that anything is gonna be resolved there, and Jeff is probably aware of this, but doesn't want to admit it, is that they're gonna have to move the rehearsal studio, I think. But the good spot, they do have a spot for it, which is Williams Chevrolet, so, that's my thought. Just throwing stuff.
We've looked at, we can't, William Chevrolet's gotta come down.
Oh, yeah, there's no question, that goes away, but,
The cost for us to move to a new building in Chevrolet, putting aside the condition of the stilts in the back, and I've been in there recently downstairs and stuff, and it's not pretty. You know, it's it's just cost prohibitive, because it's gotta be brought to ADA compliance and all current code and actors equity, because
Well, that seems like an argument to me not to develop anything above the dance rehearsal studio, right? If you're,
yeah, there's,
On that brook, anyway.
well,
right, exactly.
yeah, I mean, there's stuff going on, you know.
But any
the
impervious
town looking
surface
at
up there.
stuff and all that. I know we've looked, we've had an engineer in, and we're talking, you know, deep, like, you know, what, you know, I mean, I know what that property, what that pond looked like when I was a kid. And it, you know, and it looks like hell to candidly, and, you know, so we looked at it, it did get lowered, to excavate it out, you know, and it's like, we don't know if that's good or bad. And then, you know, we've looked at, or we've discussed, can we take the dam down further? And Deep said, we're not gonna entertain that at all.
So anyway, and the last thing, they talked about, again, natural resources and access to the river. As a practical matter, in your redevelopment agency, there is no access to the river. Yes. That's the thing. Not unless you want to be a Acapulco cliff diver. So, that's it I have. That's all I have right now.
I think Harvey has his hand up.
Oh, okay,
Yes, Harvey did.
Harvey?
Um,
By the way, I just want to say, and I forgot to mention, that I thank Mr. Thomas for being our liaison to the Board of Finance. He's been to all of our meetings and provided some exceptional financial input to us as we move forward, so thank you.
worth every penny you paid for. Just with respect to the idea of form-based zoning, the village district zone, which covers more than what's outlined in the magenta map, is basically form-based zoning. We just didn't call it that at the time. It covers the scope, the scale, architectural review. It doesn't prescribe or proscribe setbacks and side lots and all that kind of stuff. It's essentially what people in, I don't know, Glastonbury would call form-based zoning, but we're East Haddam and we just called it a village district. I think Jim would agree, I don't.
Yeah, it's what I thought it was, pretty much, but we didn't formally name it that, call it that. The other thing, just a point to make is, we're not the ones who created the red lines, because we did not exist as a agency when those lines were created, and it's a starting point. Whether we've already discussed multiple times whether we should make it bigger or not, and I think the answer was we weren't quite ready to recommend anything yet, you know what I mean? It's, we've had quite a few discussions about it, but we're not in disagreement about changing the red lines, we just,
Right.
those are the red lines that got handed to us.
Understood. And then you had to go back and correct it, to get the maps properly, then we'll find out.
John?
Yeah, I want to go back to what was mentioned about, we're just at the beginning, and I want to make 2 points. One is that once we know what we're doing on remediation of the brownfield, many more options will open up for developers. It will become more attractive, it'll be worth more to us, and we shouldn't, rush and, solidify one developer's proposal in a situation where we're going to be able to have many more opportunities. And I just want to say something about our resilience program in the town and the expansion of the map, because it does also open up opportunities that will come once we deal with the flooding issues. And we have not only Goodspeed, but we have the state CIRCA, which is the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation, has just designated us as an opportunity area, which means we're initially on a pipeline for further work that we don't know exactly what it's going to entail, but we're at the threshold of having discussions with the entities, the town, Goodspeed, and the state, looking at the whole issue of how the town may be impacted in the future with increased weather events, and how it's going to respond in a preparatory way, which I say may result in activities that open up new possibilities for some of the area that's now not even used, that may have commercial potential.
Thank you. Jeff?
Just, one other thing on the TIF and, expanding. A lot of this property is tax exempt, so there is no increment,
Yeah.
tax exempt property.
Right.
Which, I had mentioned before. The other thing is, when you start going to existing residential property that is not lighted and saying you're part of the district or whatever, that's a political issue. That just creates an issue that, we've all seen, those of us who've been here long enough and know what the impact that is. So we're not, we're not out, we can't chase the white whale here. Chester took 25 years. Some things didn't happen. The buildings got bought back by Bonfanti or whatever. All those guys over the years, they tried again or whatever, and then it happened. Parking's a big deal. Fine. And look, some of the tax exempt residences could get flipped. I mean, Goodspeed has sold a couple of properties. Part of the problem is going back, we lost 4 houses, and I'm getting yelled at every day for pushing people to sell like the little cottage and everything else, because the new Goodspeed plan is 4 shows, it's usually 3.
Right.
So now, our need for bedrooms is increased, and I think the financial model and just, if there's anything good about global warming, that you're not having snow in January. We could run longer, and they've figured that out. They did it last year, they're doing it again this year, and it works great. So, But the problem is when you have four casts, one on the stage, one
Mm-hmm.
getting ready to go on, the new one's coming into rehearse. We need about 200 bedrooms, and we only have about 140.
Mm.
And the problem now is, quality of some of the older houses we're getting problems with COVID. The idea of roommates is out the door. I mean, actors' equity is just, over us, every single day, and we have to get free housing within walking distance. That's a complicating factor. But by the same token, if someone's going to build some more housing
Mm-hmm.
and more goods being trades, some of the older houses for something new, I think there's a blank sheet of paper there looking at. But when the first Centerbridge plan came up, I mean, that wasn't even, Goodsby hadn't even thought about changing the model.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that opened some opportunities and other problems.
This is, I really commend this information session and also that Jeff is here and all. And, this is from someone who's just public and I don't have, but it's the common sense look of this, and it's not really, it is that the Main Street property is taken over by Goodspeed. They give us a commercial and there they can make the rehearsal studio in the old garage. It's a great place for a rehearsal studio. They build in the back, they build residential stuff. We have a green in front. It's on a lease. They give us the Chevy building and a couple of buildings next door. We make all that road into, and with a boardwalk behind the 2 layers, we make that commercial. We have a walking village. It will be so much nicer than what is proposed right now, and it will resolve the Goodspeed problem, which I don't think they've even thought about it. And I think all the residents will be going back and forth. We can create a small shopping center in the old town hall. And you can have a little coffee house or restaurant in the river house. Everyone will be really, really happy. We will be quaint and interesting, and we'll get some people to buy the stuff on going up Main Street, and there wouldn't be a problem. Just, some people having to kind of change their ideas of how to think.
Are there any other comments, questions? Anything
I
else?
just want to mention that one thing, that when we talked to all our environmental consultants, they all told us the same thing, the people we interviewed, that you're gonna have to have, before you can get, we got this assessment grant, that's great, they said we could get that, but they said you're probably not gonna get a remediation grant until you have a plan, because that combines together. So we're gonna have to put something on the table that is some kind of plan for how this land will be used, because they're not just gonna hand you money to take care of all the material away. They wanna combine it with the construction. And that's why it'll cost half as much if you do.
Do you mean, Jim, a town plan or a development
No,
plan?
the development plan for the property, because they wanna combine it. They'll spend half the money and they're not gonna give you twice the money.
The director of the TAP program told me that once it's developed, assuming that it would be developed, then developers will come. And that seems to be contrary to what you're saying. But
No, I'm saying is you need a master plan for how you're gonna use the property, because you're not gonna get remediation money, because they wanna combine what they do in the remediation with how you're gonna use the property.
But is that, again, you seem to just say that it was the developer submitting the plan.
Well, a plan that comes from somewhere, maybe a combination of what you like and what you don't like. I'm not saying you're gonna take one and just go with the whole thing. There may be 3 or 4 plans that you combine what you like. We are an agency that can make that decision, but
Right.
you're going to need a plan at some point, or they're not gonna give you remediation money because you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
So they could, so the idea behind this is that when you have a development, you can take certain contamination and stick it over somewhere else, put a liner on it and keep it isolated and meet an engineering control under the remediation standard regulations. If you don't have that plan and you wanna remediate it to clean it up, you have to take everything out. So this is a way to be more efficient in your remediation and save money, not just for the developer, but for the state in terms of a grant. So you can take care of it and seclude it under like pavement or an impervious surface or things like that and not have to take it all out. So that's why the DEP won't give you a open check to just remediate the whole property.
Are you working with Dr. Nefelli Bompelli? She's the director of the Technical Assistance for Brownfields at UConn.
We're working with Amy
Valancourt is
Valancourt
working
Who are
from
you working with?
Amy Valancourt from
She's working with
VHB,
VHB.
who you may know from the press articles from Haddam. She's the one that's got all of the brownfield grants and is doing all the redevelopment for the Scoville Hoe property and for the Higginham Rossi property.
Yeah.
Excuse me, what is her agency?
VHB.
She's a private consultant,
What's her company?
She's working with the folks at.
but she is the one that got us the, she's the one.
She's working with TAB.
Yes.
She's working with TAB.
We hired her to write the grant
Okay.
request and she was successful.
As a community member, I will be in touch with TAB on that to find out exactly what you're saying in terms of development prior to actually being granted.
Well, you need a plan because they'll give you money, but they wanna know how are you using the property?
Right.
Because obviously some of it is very easily handled and some of it must be removed, the
Okay.
most expensive being removal.
Yeah, I think if you just Googled the Haddam remediation projects and the brownfield grants that they've got, you'll get plenty of information on what they've done and how they've done it.
Okay.
They just had a ribbon cutting the other day.
What's your last name?
Valancourt.
Vaillancourt, Vaillancourt.
Thank you.
She might even be willing to talk to you. She's a wealth of information.
Yeah.
She's very, very good.
I know East Hampton, I attended their redevelopment agency meeting, and they're working directly with TAB, with UConn Deep, which is, state, it's official as you can get. I'll look into that a little further, thank you.
You bet.
Any other comments, questions? All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Forward to seeing you all again soon.